Uh, we need to get the microphone. It doesn't have the mic, so it came online to hear it. So we want to welcome everybody. So we want to welcome everybody who's here in person and everybody else who is online to a wonderful session tonight. I just have a couple announcements before we get to our speaker, who you're really going to enjoy. And we appreciate everybody coming out here tonight. I just want to mention once again, the Vegan Fest is coming up when? May 3rd. Good. Okay. And then Dr. Clapper is going to be there. How many people can attend his lecture? 50. That's it. If you don't get there early, you can't get in. And even if you do. So what did we do? We rented the Springfield High School, and it holds 800 people. And that's the next night on Monday, May the 4th. So Dr. Clapper will be doing a speaking. He'll do a book signing at both events, and it's free for him at the Monday night. So, we didn't think there would be enough people who would be able to see him. And he has sent a bunch of books to our place, so he'll sign them for you. Monday night, it's 7 to 8:30, 8:45, something like that. And it will be a fun, free event for your friends, family, and whoever else you think should come. Okay. I spent 3 hours walking around Springfield today at various places, handing out brochures and encouraging people to come. It's an important event, and I want him to be welcomed in our community. Let's see, what else was I going to say? There are some books that are outstanding, and outstanding books, just return them. We're not police people. We're not going to send anybody out to collect on you, but try to return them so that others can use them. I think we have a few outstanding books. Was there anything that I missed? I don't think so. Okay, so uh, I love to see some of the people who are coming to the classes through the week during the afternoon. But we're going to get on with our program. We're fortunate tonight to have another board certified lifestyle medicine physician in our community. There aren't a lot of us. I think you could call them on one hand, pretty much. I think there's 3 or 4 in the community. And Dr. Kristin Linzmeyer is here, cardiologist. She's become my favorite cardiologist. And I tell people in the classes when they ask me, who can I go to? It's so easy for me to refer to you at this point. And we really appreciate everything that you're doing. And thank you for coming.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Wow, after that intro. I want to talk a little bit tonight about some ways through lifestyle and especially nutrition that we can prevent cardiovascular disease. And I used to give this talk, and because I wasn't sure how much people knew about what different types of cardiovascular disease there was out there and what it all involved and that sort of thing. I gave this really long presentation on this is what these are arrhythmias and this is congestive heart failure and these are heart attacks. And I'm not going to do as much of that tonight, but if you have any questions about what any of those terms mean or anything, you feel free to raise your hand and feel free to just interrupt me. Raise your hand if you have questions during the presentation so that if you don't want to forget, you can just interrupt me and we'll go ahead and address them as we go. Okay, next slide, please. So again, I'm not going to talk a lot about different diseases, but we're going to talk instead about how to prevent a lot of the risk factors that lead to cardiovascular disease. And please understand that cardiovascular disease it involves the entire body, basically from head to toe. So we're not just talking about preventing heart attacks. It's also preventing strokes. It's preventing dementia. It's preventing end stage kidney disease where you need dialysis. It's preventing erectile dysfunction. It's preventing peripheral vascular disease. It involves the entire body and multiple organ systems. And so it's not just about the heart itself, although obviously includes that very important organ, my favorite organ. So we're going to start by talking about the role of cholesterol and saturated fat in the development of vascular disease and what exactly vascular disease is. And then I'm going to move on to compounds that improve the cardiovascular risk and how to enhance these through diet. And some of these compounds are things that your body creates, but you can increase the production of and enhance the production of through your lifestyle choices and especially nutrition. Understand the risk of the silent killer, which is high blood pressure or hypertension, and how that plays into the development of cardiovascular disease. Talk about the root causes of diabetes or the root cause of diabetes and how to reverse or improve it. And it is very possible to reverse it. And then differentiating between healthy, nutrient dense carbohydrates and garbage. And then at the end, I've got a kind of a special treat with some recent publications and documents that came out in the last year that are really, really critical for us as American citizens to review and to understand. So go ahead. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk first when it comes to cholesterol and saturated fat and how saturated fat increases cholesterol. So much of our recommendations involve what not to eat. So go ahead, next slide. So cholesterol is the foundation or the building block of atherosclerosis. So atherosclerosis is the crud, the inflammatory cells, the cholesterol, the scar tissue that starts to build up in the inner lining of your arteries and starts to close it off. And if cholesterol is the building block, there's two main components that contribute to developing this plaque, this atherosclerosis. Cholesterol is the foundation or the building blocks, and the second critical ingredient is inflammation. So, can you play that video? There should be a hyperlink there. Yeah, there you go. The cholesterol and arterial acne. Yeah, there you go. So Dr. Greger does this really nice video. It's pretty short on and very graphic. When I tried it earlier, yeah, try it again. It looked like it was. Do Okay. So maybe what we'll do, if we have time at the end, I'll show it to you because it's kind of fun and kind of disgusting, actually. The other thing, I don't know if Scott, if you're able to pull it up and show, because it's the arterial acne one from Greger's nutritionfacts.org. So let's just move on. But it's a very graphic kind of description of how this crud, this atherosclerosis starts to clog up your arteries, and then what happens when you actually have an acute heart attack. Go ahead and move to the next slide if you want while you're working on that. There we go. So the newest guidelines for managing cholesterol is basically the mantra of lower for longer is better. And we're starting to get really aggressive at identifying younger people even who don't think that, they're perfectly healthy, right? They have no problems with their health and they're going to live forever. But identifying those who are trending to higher cholesterol levels and getting it down as early as possible in their lives for as long as possible. And it's never too late to address it, but we know that the longer you can have a nice normal cholesterol, the better it is for you, and the more likely you're going to be able to prevent an event. Um, so cholesterol is only found in animal products. How many of you knew that? There's no cholesterol found in plant-based sources. Saturated fat, on the other hand, is found everywhere. However, serving per serving, it tends to be at higher concentrations in animal products. I mean, think of things like butter, cheese, red meat, processed meat, things like that. And so saturated fat, and I'm not going to go through how this works because it's a very long, involved process, but higher amounts of saturated fat in your diet also contribute to your body pumping more cholesterol. So it's important to not only limit dietary cholesterol, which is only found in animal foods, but also limit saturated fat. And the highest sources of saturated fat in our diet right now are cheese, chicken, because we eat so much chicken. Most of us eat more chicken, or people in general eat more chicken than they do red meat. And then desserts like cookies, cakes, and pastries, because what is found in those? Butter and vegetable oils and things like that. Were you able to find it? Oh, oh, okay. Okay. All right. Well, I'm not going to worry about it. If you think about it, if you go on nutritionfacts.org, Dr. Michael Greger's site, where he gives those little blurbs, like 5 to 8 minute, you know, videos on the evidence about certain topics, just look for arterial acne, and you can watch it. So, okay. Next slide, please. The American Heart Association recommends that less than 5 to 6% of our total daily calories comes from saturated fat, and also to avoid all trans fats, which is no longer allowed to be served in like restaurants and food. But there's the little hidden components like in tropical oils and things like that, so you can still find it, and trans fatty acids. Go ahead, next slide. And so now let's get on to the fun part of what to eat. Go ahead. Thank you. So foods that are proven to lower cholesterol. So I'm going to stop here for a second and just put a plug out for Dr. Greger's most recent book on how to lower cholesterol naturally with food. Really short and sweet. It's not very long. And he goes into great detail about ways to supplement your diet, things to eat, things to avoid also, which we already went over, but things to eat that you might want to enhance your diet with that can help lower your cholesterol. So there are certain nuts and seeds. Brazil nuts have been shown to lower cholesterol. You don't want to overdo it with Brazil nuts because you can get selenium toxicity. So he recommends no more than four. Well, he says 4 Brazil nuts a month will do it, but you can eat as many as 1 to 2, like twice a week. So that is what I do. I do 2 Brazil nuts on Sundays and Thursdays. So just for those benefits. And then also walnuts and cashews have been shown in small amounts, no more like the palm of your hand, to help lower cholesterol. Plant proteins, especially beans, including soy, split peas, chickpeas, and lentils. Viscous fiber, which those are some examples of viscous fiber. And then plant sterols, which are really hard to get all through food. You often have to take a supplement, but there are some examples of some plant sterols. And this group of recommendations has been found in the portfolio diet, which was studied to see if it would lower cholesterol, and it does indeed, to the tune of one of the weaker statins. So it can lower the cholesterol equivalent to some of the weaker statins. The stronger statins, maybe not. They're pretty powerful. But the weaker statins are equivalent to this kind of diet if you can achieve this. Go ahead, next slide. And then you can take a photo of this if you want. This is in his latest book. Do we have it out there? Or did somebody borrow it? It's checked. It's checked. Oh, okay. So this is in his newest Lowering Cholesterol book, and he basically revises his daily dozen to include foods, especially to lower cholesterol. And I just took a photocopy and stuck it in here. So I don't know how well you can look at it, but it includes the beans and it includes some of the nuts and seeds and certain spices and things like that. So, okay, next slide. So now I want to move on and talk about some of the nutrients that our body either uses to produce really healthy compounds or enhances what our body already produces to help keep our vascular system healthy. So, fiber is one of the most important and underappreciated compounds that we should be getting in our nutrition. And there's I don't know if any of you have heard of the book Fiber Fueled by Dr. Bolsewitz. It's also in the Lending Library. Yes, one of my favorite books. And it's so great. And it's really such an underappreciated a nutrient. It is a carbohydrate. So for people who say they're on a low carb diet, I really hope that they're talking about those processed, ultra processed, highly refined carbohydrates. We're going to get into that in a little bit, not nutrient dense, complex carbohydrates that are just chock full of fiber, because we as Americans tend to be deficient, significantly deficient in fiber, and we need more of it. So fiber produces short chain fatty acids, which Dr. Bolsewitz calls the most healing substance in all of the world or something like that. And so short chain fatty acids have anti-cancer properties, anti-inflammatory properties, really help protect and heal our vascular system. And decreases leaky gut. And in order for people to process fiber, they need those good, healthy, that gut microbiome. So if people are eating a very heavily processed and ultra processed diet and they're not getting a lot of fiber and they decide that they're going to all of a sudden increase their fiber intake by tenfold, they may not feel very well. They might feel like a bomb went off in their gut. Okay. And that's where a lot of people say, oh, I can't eat beans. I can't eat broccoli. I can't eat cabbage. Well, it's possibly that they went and kind of overdosed on it, and then didn't feel well because they didn't have the microbes to help process it. So I usually tell people when they're starting to make these changes, start low and go slow. It's no different than starting an exercise program. You're not going to go and run a marathon on your first trying out jogging. You're going to start low and go slow and gradually increase your way up so that you can start to develop those microbes that'll help process fiber. Nitric oxide dilates the arteries and heals arterial injury. So it helps keep our arteries healthy and repairs them. And you can get those through dark leafy greens, beets, celery. I didn't put on there. That's a source also. Anti-inflammatories, remember the second component to vascular disease is inflammation. So turmeric, ginger, garlic, but basically all the dark leafy greens, berries, a lot of different colors, fruits and vegetables all have a certain amount of anti-inflammatories. These just are kind of the highest ones, the highest amounts. And then antioxidants, you can see that listed there. Basically, if you're eating the rainbow when it comes to all the fruits and vegetables, you're going to get all of these things that you need. Go ahead, next slide. So let's move on to diabetes. Diabetes is caused by increased saturated fat in the diet, and the saturated fat blocks insulin receptors. So maybe you've heard that type 2 diabetes is also referred to as insulin resistance. So your body, your muscles, your cells are no longer responding to insulin. So your body pumps out more and more insulin, hoping to get a response. But if you have a bunch of saturated fat that's clogging those receptors, the blood sugar is not going to go anywhere. I mean, it's just going to go up, up, and up because the cells can't take it in because they're not responding to insulin, and insulin levels are going to go up. And both of those are very inflammatory to our blood vessels, both glucose and insulin. And so a lot of people mistakenly think that diabetes is caused by carbohydrates. Again, saying, I avoid all carbs. Okay, you can avoid all processed carbs and refined carbs and ultra processed carbs, fine. But please do not avoid all carbohydrates because then you're not getting all of those beneficial fiber, anti inflammatory, antioxidant components. Um, Blood sugar is really the symptom, it's the sign that you have insulin resistance. So it's important to monitor. But in order to reverse diabetes, you got to lower the saturated fat. Okay, so animal products, even things like avocado, vegetable oils, coconut milk, certain nuts and seeds tend to have higher amounts. So just really be cautious of the saturated fat. And it sometimes is really difficult for me to convince people that you got to be careful about all that meat you're eating. Yes, your sugars may be lower, but you still have clogged insulin receptors. So, and they often are requiring medications. Please. So basically, that you have some component of insulin resistance, but based on your numbers, oh, yes. So her question was, what does it mean when you are pre-diabetic? And we sometimes call that borderline diabetes. So it means that you do have some insulin resistance, but it's not so fulminant that you are not getting some response. And so we monitor diabetes by checking hemoglobin A1C levels, which is an indicator of what your average blood sugar has been over about the last 3 months. And so there's a certain range that's pre-diabetic and a certain range that is full-blown type 2 diabetes. And when you're in that borderline, that is the time to really make some changes before you start requiring medications and before you start developing the dreaded complications of diabetes, which is heart disease, it's vision loss, it's kidney failure, it's vascular disease everywhere. So that is the time to especially, but even people who've been on medications, insulin, they can lower their medication requirements and in some cases completely come off all medications. In fact, in people who are really motivated to try and reverse their diabetes who are on medications, we have to warn them that if they're all in and they want to make these dietary changes, they really need to pay close attention to their blood sugars so that they don't get low, which can be the blood sugars can be quite low and it can be very dangerous, even life-threatening. So it does take a lot of work with their providers, their healthcare providers. Next slide, please. This is just an example of how insulin resistance can cause all sorts of problems in our body. The retinopathy up in the upper left corner is the vision loss, and you can see it can lead to blindness. Next slide. And then finally, I just want to address the carbohydrates versus carbage, because again, not all carbs are created equal. Okay. So the healthy carbs that we can eat more of, you don't have to avoid, are the whole complex nutrient dense carbohydrates. They're often low in calories and very low in fat and often have no cholesterol. High in fiber, they're high in on all of those compounds, the phytochemicals and antioxidants that I mentioned before, and there are some examples. And then the carbage is what you see on the right. And I just want to comment that maybe you've heard this from Charlie and Scott or other presenters. I don't tend to love the V words, I call them, vegan or vegetarian. They're easy to say, and they're kind of a nice general way of describing maybe what your eating pattern is. But it doesn't really tell people what we eat. It tells people what we don't eat. So you can be a vegan and have a very unhealthy, highly processed, with a lot of garbage sort of diet and still be vegan. Oreos are vegan, French fries are vegan. So that's why using, more of a descriptive term like a whole food, plant-based or plant-focused diet is probably a better way of describing what exactly you are eating. Okay. Next slide, please. So the silent killer, hypertension, the new American Heart Association and American College of Cardiology guidelines for hypertension and how to treat and lower blood pressure came out last year. And they come out every 5 to 10 years or so. And the goal blood pressure, there were a couple of key updates, but just focusing on a few. Goal blood pressure for everybody is less than 130 over 80. Okay. And so that's really a goal for everybody to try and strive for. And normal is actually considered less than 120 over 80, but our goal, at least for medications or your lifestyle changes, is less than 130 over 80. So in order to do this, there's a couple of things that you can do on your own. And these are a couple of the recommendations. But I didn't mention like quit smoking on here. That's kind of a no-brainer to get your blood pressure down. Quit smoking, regular exercise. But these are a couple of the things that not everybody is aware of. And so I really like to emphasize when somebody's coming into my office and I'm talking to them about how to get their blood pressure down before starting medications. One is dietary sodium, and especially focusing on things like fast food, restaurant food. How many times do you eat out a week? What are some hidden or secret sources of sodium in their diet? Even canned beans, beans are great, really, really healthy food, they can have a lot of sodium in them. So canned foods, if they are eating dairy, cheese is an incredible source of sodium. I don't think people are really aware of how much sodium is in cheese. Eating plenty of fruits and vegetables. Fruits and vegetables tend to be naturally low in sodium and high in potassium, and they have been shown to help lower the blood pressure in studies. Minimizing or avoiding alcohol altogether. Alcohol is a big contributor to high blood pressure. I just saw somebody today who has a problem with some alcohol abuse and has been abstinent for quite some time. Blood pressure was well controlled. She was needing a medication, but it was well controlled with stopping drinking. And recently she relapsed and her blood pressure is now through the roof. So, we had a nice discussion about what we needed to do about that. And she's really working hard to fix that. But alcohol, even alcohol in what we would consider moderation, or people who don't drink every day and they do more of a binge use just on the weekends, all of those different alcohol use patterns can contribute to high blood pressure. Yes. Yes. So for people who are listening online, bread has a lot of sodium. Another one I would add is chicken, because what they do, especially in chicken breasts, is they inject it with saline to make it more plump, that sort of thing. So, if overweight, losing even just 5% of the body weight can lower blood pressure. And then, especially if you're symptomatic, so you have been documented to snore heavily, actually pause your breathing. Your spouse might elbow you like, hey, you need to wake up, you're not breathing, and have a lot of daytime sleepiness. You could have untreated sleep apnea, where those low oxygen levels at night are driving up your adrenaline system and raising your blood pressure chronically. And getting that treated is really, really helpful, whether it's through weight loss or getting diagnosed and then using the CPAP can help lower the blood pressure also. Yes. Oh, okay. And then here's another hidden cause of high blood pressure, and these are anti-inflammatories, non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, and these can both be over the counter or prescription. So examples are ibuprofen, naproxen, Aleve, Advil, Motrin, and then some of the prescription ones are meloxicam or Mobic, and Celebrex, I think, are two of the most common ones that I see. So all of those, especially for people who have chronic pain, maybe it's chronic hip problem or back pain, and they're taking them on a daily basis, can raise your blood pressure. It's not good for your stomach either or your kidneys. If you are a habitual coffee drinker and you're drinking in moderation, so 2 to 3 to 4 cups, even 4 cups is considered moderation, it should not affect your blood pressure. It also should not affect your risk for any rhythm problems with your heart. Now, one difference is that if you are not a habitual coffee drinker and you decide you're going to all of a sudden drink 3 lattes while on vacation, then yes, your blood pressure can go shooting up. So, but for people who are regular users, it shouldn't be an issue. Yeah. Yeah. And did it help? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, well, and it kind of it begs the question, why was she wanting all that coffee? Was because she was tired, because she had untreated sleep apnea? Okay, all right. But I mean, those are always questions like to consider. Is like why is somebody drinking all that coffee if they're exhausted and they're not sleeping at night, and then it's a vicious cycle. Yeah. So okay, next slide, please. Oh, one thing back to the hypertension. One thing that really was emphasized in the recent guidelines, and this is something that all of us, I think, have an understandable fear of, is that there's a big emphasis that in order to prevent cognitive decline or dementia, goal blood pressure less than 130/80. It's dementia of all kinds, including Alzheimer's, is more and more being recognized as a vascular disease. So, promoting really good blood flow to the brain can help decrease those plaques that can get deposited. Okay. And one way to help improve that blood flow is keeping the blood pressure nice and low. So, because I mean, if you were to interview people, most people would say they're more afraid of having dementia than they are of having a heart attack. And so something really emphasized in the recent guidelines. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, you do need to be careful if you have kidney disease, that because your kidneys help regulate your potassium equilibrium in your blood. And so if you have kidney disease, you really have to be careful of some of those potassium supplements, which is really what that is. Even some people with advanced kidney disease, they're recommended to really watch potassium containing foods like bananas, tomatoes, things like that, potatoes. So there are certain circumstances. In general, though, if you're using a little bit as a sodium chloride substitute, you don't need to like go and get your labs checked regularly to make sure your potassium is not too high. Yeah, it's more for people who have underlying conditions that would predispose them to that. Yep. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is where I just want to talk about three really important publications that came out in the last year that I think we as Americans need to just be aware of and where we're getting our information from. So the first one is the scientific report for the 2025 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. This is the advisory committee who gave the recommendations based on the most recent evidence and research to what should be put into the 2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, which is the third document. Okay. These are researchers, scientists, healthcare workers who volunteered hours and hours of their time reviewing the latest research. The next one is the Eat Lancet Planetary Health Diet, which came out in October of this past year. And this planetary health diet is what the Eat Lancet Council or Committee came up with based on all of their extensive research on what people should be eating around the world to help not only improve human health and longevity, but also planetary health. So, and I'm only going to get into a couple of aspects of the human health part because it's a very, very long document and we're not going to talk about the climate and environmental concerns. And then the last one is the actual 2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans that had a delayed release and it actually came out in January of this year. Okay, next slide, please. So the scientific report, specifically, I'm talking about some of the recommendations that are new and improved that this committee was recommending to go into the dietary guidelines for Americans. specifically related to improving cardiovascular health, decreasing cardiovascular disease. So one recommendation is limiting total saturated fat to less than 10% of daily calories. And remember, the American Heart Association has even a lower recommendation, but starting at age 2 and replacing the saturated fat with unsaturated fats, especially polyunsaturated fats. And this is a direct quote. Evidence indicates that when reducing butter, processed and unprocessed red meat, and dairy, substitution or replacement with a wide range of plant-based food sources, including plant-based protein foods like beans, peas, and lentils, whole grains, vegetables, or monounsaturated fatty acid and polyunsaturated fatty acid rich vegetable oils and spreads, is associated with cardiovascular disease risk reduction. This is the first time it's been recommended to go into the dietary guidelines for Americans to emphasize plant-based sources of protein over animal-based sources in order to help the heart and the cardiovascular system. That's right. Yes, Charlie.
Because they think about the dietary guidelines as being what comes out in the pyramid that just came out that puts butter and red meat.
Yep, we're going to get to that.
Are you going to get to that?
That was the third document.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Next slide. Yep, I'm on it. Remember, this is the experts who are recommending what should go into the dietary guidelines for Americans. We're going to find out in just a second whether they were listened to. Okay. So they also noted, and this is also really important, how many times have any of you said or maybe heard other people say, well, I don't really eat that much red meat. I eat mostly chicken and other poultry and fish. So they're also saying there's a lack of benefit. There's a lack of good research that supports substituting within animal-based foods, even if the saturated fat content is lower, in order to reduce cardiovascular disease. There's just no evidence. So eating more chicken instead of red meat, you'd think it'd be a healthier choice, but they're saying we don't have the evidence to support that. We do have the evidence to support eating plant-based sources of protein. And then replacing plant sources that are high in saturated fat, like the tropical oils, with vegetable oils, or using less oil or no oil. But if you're going to make a choice, with vegetable oils higher in unsaturated fat. Okay, so all of this is to help decrease cardiovascular disease risk. This is what they recommended. So now let's move on to the next publication that came out that I found really exciting in the fall of this past year of 2025. Next slide, please. This is the Eat Lancet Commission that came up with that planetary health diet. So they did this because our nutrition across the world is really it's one of the root causes of a lot of problems with health, our environment, the climate, equity. I mean, you could go on, and we all need to eat. And so we have to be very careful about where and how we're getting our food. And so they came up with this planetary health diet that provides appropriate energy for our needs at all different ages of life. It's a diversity of whole or minimally processed foods that are primarily plant-sourced or plant-based. And importantly, it's flexible. It's compatible with most cultures, dietary patterns, traditions, and individual preferences. Next slide. So what they recommend is the whole or minimally processed foods that are primarily plant-based, whole grains over refined grains, unsaturated fats over saturated fats, minimal amounts of added salt and sugar, an increased consumption of nuts, legumes, including soy and seeds. Go ahead, next slide. And they did, with all of the research that they did, they came up with some recommendations for people who are going to eat animal products, considerations of what to limit your weekly intake to. And think about what the standard American diet involves. Most meals involve some form of meat, cheese, egg, almost every single meal. Some people cannot fathom not having meat or minimum cheese with every meal. So they're recommending limiting red meat to 1 serving weekly, poultry to 2 servings weekly, eggs to 2 eggs weekly, dairy 1 serving daily, so it's about 7 servings a week, and fish 2 servings weekly. And so if you do the math, that averages to about 2 servings per day, which is way less than what the standard American eats. Go ahead, next slide. And if they do this, they did this extrapolation. If people did this around the world, 15 million premature deaths per year, or 27% of total deaths worldwide annually, could be prevented. And given that cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of death, not just here in the United States, but everywhere in the world, most of these disease or the deaths prevented would be cardiovascular in nature. I mean, think about people who are on this spectrum. They're like, no, I should probably eat healthier. And they're not ready to be a completely 100% whole food plant-based. I mean, this is a target. This is an achievable goal. See if you can cut down to this many servings this week from instead of every meal. See if you can make this your goal, getting them along that spectrum of toward a healthier dietary plan. And so this was really, really important. And unfortunately, it didn't get maybe the publicity here in the United States that it should have. But I thought this was really impressive. Okay, so next slide, please. So this is the dietary guidelines for Americans that was released in January of 2026. And you can see it looks a little different from the dietary pyramid that we had previously. It's inverted. And the produce or but I guess producers of this infographic here said it was not designed to emphasize one type of food over another, but we're all visual people, and it's very clear how things were organized of what they wanted to emphasize and other things to de-emphasize. So let's go on to the next slide. So there are some things they got right. They specifically addressed the impact that processed foods have on our health outcomes, especially with cardiometabolic diseases, so cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and all of the problems that come with obesity. They emphasize real foods, which you could extrapolate that phrase to whole foods. Okay, I think we could all agree that whole food is better than processed foods. Prepared with few ingredients and without added sugars, industrial oils, artificial flavors, or preservatives. All right. They recommend a goal of 5 servings of fruits and vegetables daily. I think we all know we could probably even do better than that. That's the base goal. Should be probably even a little higher. Dairy without added sugars. Okay, if you're going to eat dairy, probably best not to have added sugars. They emphasize healthy fats and limiting saturated fat to less than 10% of the daily calories. Okay. And then eating whole grains while limiting refined grains. That all sounds great. They do mention limiting alcohol, but they don't actually give an amount anymore. And then, of course, limiting added sugars and dietary sodium. Next slide. So what they could have done better and maybe listened to the committee that was giving the recommendations for what should be in the guidelines. Their protein recommendations could be better. They recommend consuming a variety of protein foods from animal sources, including eggs, poultry, seafood, and red meat, as well as full-fat dairy. I don't know how we would be able to keep our saturated fat intake to less than 10% of our daily calories if those kind of foods are being emphasized. It would be impossible. Those are opposite. The outcomes are completely opposite. There's no way you could achieve both. And the recommendation of butter and beef fat, which is in the dietary guidelines, is not evidence based. It's been associated with increased cholesterol levels and increased risk of cardiovascular events. So there's no evidence that eating more of those foods is going to help improve health outcomes. And in fact, the converse is true. And then the inverted pyramid, like I already mentioned, is really suggestive that plant-based sources of protein are less important or inferior. I don't know if you noticed, but kind of lower down, there was the bowl of rice with like a little bit of beans on it. And whole grains were at the very bottom. So they could have improved some of their recommendations. Yeah, some nuts and seeds. Yeah, they have eggs and shrimp though a little higher. Anyway, okay. So next, back up one more. Thank you. So I was really happy that the American College of Cardiology came out with their statement on what they think about these guidelines. Um, and and I think that it's really critical to notice that there are a number of health organizations that represent a lot of healthcare providers that felt that these guidelines were completely, not completely, like I said, they got some things right, but key important parts were not evidence based and in fact could be harmful. So direct quotes from the statement from my organization is because plant proteins like beans, peas, and lentils, nuts and soy, as well as seafood and dairy sources have demonstrated greater health benefits than red and processed meats, and the latter have been linked to gut dysbiosis, inflammation, diabetes mellitus, and several cancers, plant protein sources should be emphasized to patients. And then they went on to say, ultimately, unprocessed fiber and nutrient-rich plant foods featured in vegetarian, whole food plant-based, Mediterranean, and DASH diets. DASH diet is the diet to address, let's see, what does DASH diet stand for? Diet to something about treating hypertension. It's the diet that is a low. Thank you. Thank you. So those types of diets are optimal for cardiovascular health, cancer reduction, and longevity. So unfortunately, not everybody comes to talks like this, and they might think, hey, all this plant animal-based protein is now fair game. It's just going to make me stronger and younger and healthier, and they're getting really the wrong message. So that's why we need to spread the word. So, yes. They do use a lot of olive oil. And remember what they're saying when they're talking about, for instance, certain oils or dairy sources. First of all, they're talking primarily about low fat or non-fat dairy, and they're comparing it with the alternatives like red and processed meat, full fat dairy. It is a healthier choice. Olive oil is a healthier choice compared to butter and lard, and certain other oils. So I can't remember which of the lifestyle medicine physicians that I followed. It might have been Dr. Greger, who said that he doesn't really like calling foods unhealthy or healthy, although I think there are some exceptions that we could say some foods are truly unhealthy and some are very healthy. He likes to do a comparison. It's always compared to something else. When you're eating something, there should be no judgment involved, right? We shouldn't be judging ourselves. We shouldn't be judging others. There's often a healthier choice we could have picked, and there's often a less healthy choice we could have picked. So just, and so when it comes to some of these recommendations, what they're doing is they're basing it on research and studies that compared one choice with another, and one came out on top. So, but if you choose to be completely whole food plant-based, that's probably the best as far as health outcomes. Yes. Again, if you choose to use oil, it's probably one of the healthier kinds. Olive oil is still probably top. Yes. Her question, sorry for the listeners, was what do I think of avocado oil? Remember also that when it comes to risk factors for a lot of things, but including cardiovascular disease, obesity is a big risk factor. And if you just do the math, fat has 9 calories per gram, carbohydrates and protein have 4 calories per gram. And it doesn't take a whole lot of glugs of oil when you're cooking something, sauteing something, to have those grams add up. And so for people who are trying to lose weight, avoiding things that are high in any kind of fat, saturated fat or unsaturated fat, decreasing those are really easy calories to get rid of. And that includes olive oil and avocado oil. So that's like one of the first things that should be decreased when people are looking for low-hanging fruit. Like, I would like to lose a certain amount of weight. I know it'll be healthier for my blood pressure and my cholesterol. Looking for those easy targets. I'm not saying it's easy to do, but they're easy targets just based on the amount of calories. Avocados, for instance, a medium-sized avocado has somewhere between 20 and 25 grams of fat in it. A lot of it's healthy fat, but that's a lot of fat. 25 times 9, and some people are eating 1 avocado a day. Those are easy calories just to get rid of if you just decrease the amount of avocados that you're eating. So, yes. Yeah. So the question is, Tylenol okay to take? So Tylenol is very safe to take in the appropriate doses based on how many times a day and also based on age. And it should be perhaps avoided if people have chronic liver disease. But if you have a healthy liver and you are using the normal doses on the bottle, it's very safe to take. And it's a preferred, the other name for it is acetaminophen, by the way. It's a preferred painkiller to the anti-inflammatories that I said if we could avoid, that would be better for us for our blood pressure. Some people don't find it is as effective, say, for arthritis pain because it is not an anti-inflammatory. It is a painkiller and a fever reducer. It is not an anti-inflammatory. So it kind of depends on what works for you. Yes. Any other questions? The next slide is just a end slide. Answered everybody's questions? All right. Yes.
Yeah. To absorb certain vitamins.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe you can have those.
So we should get, if you're eating, say, some nuts every day and some seeds and an avocado once in a while. I'm trying to think of things that kind of come. What do you recommend, Scott? Nuts and seeds and a little bit of olive.
Yes, fat. There's no such thing as a no fat diet. So even broccoli has fat.
Yeah.
So you're getting even if you're 100% whole food plant based, you're probably easily still getting 10 to 20% of your calories from fat.
Yeah. I don't think beans have a lot, but yeah, because of just all of the different things that we're eating, it tends to add up. But if you were looking for plant-based sources that were relatively healthy, I would say nuts and seeds are the highest ones, and nut butters. And then if you did decide to use oil, a little bit of olive oil, that's all you need. That's plenty. Yeah. All right. Everyone, thanks for attending, and spread the word. Family members and friends.
Next week is all diabetes. So you touched on it there, but the whole class next week will be about diabetes.
Let's do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that.
Charlie Scott. This might be live. Okay, I'll take that. Okay, it's cool.
Maybe that's before you.
You do not have to limit fruit with diabetes, and I'll talk all about that next week on the diabetes class.
Thank you.
Haven't seen you for a long time.
It's been a while.
I know. But you're not going to very. This one.
Yeah, I used to go to